We could even change tires and fix a tire too.
Oh, yes, yes, that was a big business.
Okay.
Big business, changing tires. Then, being in a rural community, many of your customers were farmers. And in those days, changing tires, truck tires, was a bear. A split rim was very dangerous in many ways. Probably the most gruesome and worst job you could have was somebody bringing a tire off a manure spreader. And of course they'd bring it in, it was frozen, and you had to let it thaw, and well, you know. So that was part of it. But some of the things I never expected, going back to that, was our station was also the place where everybody called that had a cow in heat. Because the artificial inseminator came around, and we took calls for him, and he would come in and look at the phone list, and we would say so-and-so had so many cows in heat, and he would go inseminate them. I mean, so we were involved.
You didn't inseminate.
No, I did not. I was the go-between. And we also took all of the calls for the farmers that needed oil or diesel or gasoline on the farm.
Was that provided by Standard Oil?
There were trucks that had employees and drivers that were Standard Oil trucks. They belonged to the individual, but they were basically subsidiary to the Standard Oil Company and carried out their business. And so that was one of the other things that you were doing in the station. Maybe one of the oddest.
First name, DeReamer, that took over after Harold Strobel retired.
Hornstream.
Now, I can't say his first name.
I'm sorry, guys, if we can just because everything gets stopped when.
One of the strangest kinds of things that happened that I can think of is, of course, in those days we had an old crank telephone. The operator was above the old bank building. And she called and said, "Have you seen Dr. Vizina go by? Going to Mankato." And I said, "No." "Well, if you see him, please flag him down. We got an emergency." So, I mean, you did a lot of other things and interacted with the community in many ways. I don't know that we even had a Chamber of Commerce then. I don't believe we did. I was not a member if we did. We were forced into some strange situations in a way. There were 7 or 9 service stations in Mapleton.
Really?
At that time. And so the competition was great. There were 3 auto dealerships. All of them had service stations too, or sold gas. Well, maybe all of them did not, but anyway. So that you had a great deal of competition going on for just servicing cars.
Right.
And there was always the problem of a gas war and so forth. I remember that one of my competitors came over one day and said to me, "When did you change the price of your gasoline?" And in those days it would be at 25.4 or something like that. And I decided, well, I'm just going to make it 25.9 because I don't think they look at the last digit. And he came over, he couldn't understand why I would raise the price like that. And lo and behold, next time I looked, he had raised his price the same way. But it was a lot of, there wasn't a lot of camaraderie, I'll say that, among the stations.
Really?
We always thought that our brand of gas was better than theirs and our tires were better than theirs. Whatever other brand it may have been. But so that there was real competition, and it was very much, I think, dictated by the name recognition. Standard Oil of Indiana.
What were some of the other stations? What were the
We
brands?
had Sinclair,
Okay.
DX, Webb,
Okay.
Texaco. That's all I can think of right now, but that's gives you an idea. The DX was an independent, or no, the Webb station was an independent. And we always accused they sold a lot of water in their gas or something like this, but yeah, I don't think it was true, but they did sell a non-named brand, let's put it that way, and I think they bought it on the open market. So they were kind of the undercuts to the standard prices that we charged.
You mentioned that there's 0.4 or 0.5. I mean, now all you ever see is 0.9.
That's right.
Were you the one who created that 0.9 then?
Maybe, but I know I did here in Mapleton, but
Okay.
I'm not sure. But it was, you know, it just didn't make sense to me. There were different things that you tried to do. I remember 3M came out with their little reflective red tape, and it came in a roll. And I got a roll of it, and then I put an ad in the paper that any kid that wanted to could come by the station, and I would cut a piece and put it on the back fender of his bicycle. But you tried to do things like that to get business in a very minor way. You know, we weren't on the street corner telling people that our gas was better than theirs or anything like that, but it was some of the things we tried to do. Beyond that, it was a lot of work, a great deal of work.
Do you want to go through an average day, or I'm guessing that you were there pretty much any time it was open.
Pretty much. Pat was working in Mankato at the old Emmanuel down the hill as a nurse, and she worked night shifts, I think. Went to work at, yeah, but anyway, I would go in the morning and generally open up the station, and we were open at 6 to 6:30. I would come home for lunch, and then I would go back, and mostly I would close up the station at 9. But often once in a while I would not have one of the employees. There were generally just 2 of us that worked in the station, and we had then part-time help on weekends. Beyond that, you know, the day started that you had scheduled, you hoped to have scheduled a number of oil changes and things like that. But then there was always the importance, other things that came up. I have a flat tire, I need this, I need that. And that was a very, so that you had a hard time doing that, because every time they rang, the bell rang when they ran across the signal tube, you had to run out and then wait on them and do the full service.
Right.
And it was a long day. And I guess we made a living. We didn't get wealthy at it by any means. And, it was, in a way, I got to know people, and that was the interesting thing, because there were in Mapleton at that time, 5 restaurants, I believe.
Wow.
And there would be a group that would always meet to have coffee or something like that. And then some of the restaurants, there were card rooms associated with them, and the people, there would be guys in there playing cards. I never did get into the card business, but there was too much other stuff to do. But at any rate, it was always something like that going on that you really liked to work on, just meeting the public. And how you did it, I don't know. You know, it was just, it was my first experience. in working in any kind of a business, that I was working with the public. I never did that before that. I'd always done other types of work, and this was my first public work.
How old were you at the time?
Let me see.
54?
That was in 1952. So that would be, I was born in 29, 30 to 52.
23?
23, 24, 24, you know, 24, 25, you know, because I graduated from high school, and then I was, did an apprenticeship on the railroad, and then into the service, and married just before we went into the service, and then came back here, so
Okay.
I was about 24.
Can you give me a physical description? I know Pat had the photo, but just tell me a little bit about everything that you had, because I'm sure you had to put it out and take it in each day, and because at that time I'm also guessing that many times people didn't come into the station, they just sat behind the wheel and...
Yeah, yeah, that's, at the station you normally had a rack of oil, canned oil, and you had probably a rack of tires that you advertised. We did not have any other, well, we had the equipment, the chamois that we used to wash the windshields with, and we used to buy shark skin cloth to wipe the window to get the bugs off.
Okay.
And I bought that up at the Albright store in Mapleton. But you go up and get a yard of that too, and then cut it up in little pieces. And you had that type of stuff that you brought in. You had your pail that you had water in to refill radiators. So it was all of that that you would take in and out at night. In the station, we did have a Coke machine, which was something that we made a little money on, because, but it was a self-operated, you know, you put in a quarter and you slide this, you don't see them anymore. But anyway, it was one way that there was just a little bit of overhead covered with that. There were not a lot of gatherings in the station where people would come and visit. There really wasn't that much room. The station itself, the office area, was what? Half the size of this porch.
Okay.
And so there wasn't a lot of room where people could visit. There was, you had a grease room, lube rack, you know, you had your air compressors and everything in the back end. We did do a big business once when we had a power outage here in Mapleton. We were out for 24, 48 hours, something like that. And I was the only station in Mapleton that could pump gas. I had a hand pump. Crank it and fill up a measuring can to $5, and you sold it as, or 5 gallons, and you sold 5 gallons at a time.
Okay.
And those days, that was a very long day because hand pumping all of the gas took a long time. Other than that, I'm trying to think of anything that really happens at the station. You had some parking next to the station where sometimes we would do truck greasing, and we'd do that outside, maybe on a creeper or something like that, and service trucks. But again, the real brute labor was changing tires, and you had no machines, everything was by hand. And then breaking the seal on a tire wasn't too bad on a car tire, but with a truck tire, you had big hammers that you just used and drove the thing off. Brute strength, and even my wife, the gals used to change tires like that, and it was tough. It was really tough work. But I think that really, if I look back on those years, I got to know the people of Mapleton. And I still see a few of them now and then that used to come into the station. Most of them quite a bit younger. They were high school kids at the time, but they I see a few of them around. But the business changed drastically after I left. We were the call center, as I said, for the trucks to deliver gas and fuel to farms. At the time that I was in the station, there were 12 operating farms between Mapleton and Beaufort, where people lived and farmed the land. Today there are 2. And that had changed greatly about delivering fuel and so forth. There just isn't very many people delivering fuel to these places now, and they've all got very large tanks and so on and so forth. So that whole section of the business is gone. And the same thing is true for all of our gas stations. They do sell a little oil, but heaven help you if you want more than that. And so it's a big change over what it used to be. And it's hard to visualize, even kind of hard to remember what it was like. But
and you talked a little bit about the relationship with the other stations. Were there, what was the kind of the competition like? You mentioned a little bit of, you'd say that they water their gas or something else, or?
Well, there's 2 different aspects to it. I think that one, the companies like Standard Oil and Texaco always talked about the things they had in their gas that was much better than everybody else. And I think Shell, I'm pretty sure it was Shell Company, came out with TCP gas additive, which was great. And I'll never forget the Standard Oil guy coming out and talking about, well, we've got this additive, and I have no idea what it was, what the name of it was, but he says that Shell stuff, that's just Tomcat piss. TCP. It was that kind of a thing that went on primarily between the operator and the company they were representing. Now, to talk about the individuals, we would talk, but there was not any camaraderie that I would see in it whatsoever. Very little. Well, let's see. The Sinclair station, Albright ran that. He was mayor. So there was maybe you felt, well, he got more business because he was mayor, but, there was no evidence of it. It just, it was a natural thing you'd feel about it. Beyond that, I can't think of, if you ask me who was running some of the other stations, the only one that comes to mind is the one Texaco station that was also the Pontiac dealership. No, they were Sinclair. They were a Sinclair station. The Chevrolet dealer was a Texaco. But they were not really in the business of selling gas. They were in the business of selling cars and repairing cars. So it was a very different type of thing. Beyond that, I don't know that there was, well, I did get to know fairly well an operator in Wells of a Standard station there, which was one of the big stations in Minnesota in terms of volume that he was doing. And the company had said, well, you should go down there and talk to him and get some ideas about how to sell more tires and so on and so forth. Beyond that, and the other station that I remember of Standard Oil, I think, was a station on the corner where there used to be the sign about the hanging of the
Oh, sure.
Indians. I believe that was a Standard Oil station, if I recall correctly.
You're right.
And but beyond that, really, I don't know much more about what we had in terms of interaction.
Okay.
It just wasn't. I think we all tried to do our thing, but not to offend anybody else. It was a gentlemanly type of thing.
Okay.
At least that was my feeling.
What,
Yeah.
what do you think, you mentioned the huge changes just after you left there, but I mean, between that and today, ask you to put on your philosopher's cap a little bit, or cultural sociologist, and just talk about the differences that kind of change makes in society.
Oh, I think it's very large. I mean, the people that work today in a service station really don't get to know many of them. They're a convenience store, and they're in the business of selling a lot of other things besides gas and oil. They're there to attract, they sell the gas and oil, but they sell a lot of other stuff. But as you work with them, it's passing at the counter, you check out and you pay and out you go. When we were working with people, you know, if you were greasing their car or if you were checking the oil in their car or whatever it might be, you carried on a conversation, not only about the weather, but about the crops, but about the family, all of that. So that whole element of personal interaction and personal information, I guess you could call it, about one another is gone. I don't see that at all anymore. And I think that society has lost a great deal by not having opportunities for that type of it. I mean, where can you go today and have an interaction as you purchase whatever it might be? You may have more interaction with the guy trying to sell you a new car than you would with anything else you buy. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
the sense of community that
yeah.
you guys had was...
Yeah, we had a true sense of community in that, you know, I had my customers. I knew who they were. I had those customers that came just, you know, to get a Kleenex or to bring in a manure spreader tire. But you accepted that with the hopes that maybe you'd get them in as a permanent customer. That was the whole thing that you did. So you bent over backwards of trying to attract people, but in terms of advertising our station, yeah, I put out a calendar every year, picture calendar. I forget what the pictures were on it, but little banks that you have, these squeeze banks that look like a football, and I don't know what else we used to do as and we gave S&H green stamps also, which is something that was, you know, I shake my head about it, but we did give stamps, and there was S&H and was there gold bond stamps, I think, were the two big stamps. But we had the S&H, and so that was one of our draws that we tried to promote.
Yeah. Interested about the car dealerships, because I wasn't sure. Olivan, of course, is a name that is familiar with Mapleton, but can you talk what you remember about the dealerships too, because that deals with transportation?
Yeah, well, the Will Auto Company, which was maybe the oldest there at that time, and that was
Across the street.
yeah, down a block. It'd be right across from where Dietz's are today. And they had a big dealership, but primarily Chevrolet. They were, Lawrence Will was a wonderful human being, very, very personable. and helped me on a number of occasions, just going and asking questions. He was that kind of an individual. The other dealership was the Anderson Motors that sold Pontiacs and had a Sinclair station down at the other end of town towards the school. And I guess you'd say my brother-in-law worked there as a mechanic. Then the Olivan was right next door to the station, and Hank was quite a character. He was up to something all the time, and he started a stock car racing over at Hungry Hollow in Mankato. I think it's out by the old travel trailer.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, Keepers. It was out in that road somewhere that there was a little bowl like, and he started that. It never went very far, but he was into some stuff like that. One day, Hank came over to me and was driving a truck, and it sounded awful. And he said, "Hugo, look under the hood. There's something wrong. See if you can see what it is." So I lifted up the hood, and he had this truck V8 engine running, but there was no head on the side. I lifted up, and these pistons are coming up at me like that, and he laughed and laughed about when I jumped back when I opened the hood. Anyway, that was Hank Olivan. He was, but Hank was well known, very well known, and then became a farmer. And I don't know, I think that Don Rice bought that out, and then I don't know, it went on. But all of the dealerships just basically folded when the proprietors passed on. And they could not compete. You know, it's like you have to be big in order to get the discounts on the cars. So that was, and I would say that most of those dealerships, that their biggest income was parts and service.
Yeah.
But they were here. They were all here, and so you had those dealerships. We depended a lot on, you know, kind of hoping that their cars would wear out and we could sell tires cheaper than they could, or less expensive, I'm sorry, not cheaper. And the other thing that I think we really thought about was that we had the restaurants in town, so there was always activity. You had a movie theater, and you had the popcorn wagon on the corner, on weekends at least, selling popcorn. And
a bakery.
a bakery, yes, but 5 restaurants in town. You know, they weren't very classy, but the Dewdrop Inn, and I don't know what all the names were, but they were there. So.
Are any of the buildings still standing?
Oh yeah.
Oh, what are they now? Can you?
Okay, the buildings, the Standard Station right now was where the old Casey's was.
Okay.
On the corner by the Lutheran Church. And that building, the station was torn down. And then they built that. The DX station is where Dietz's was at. Then Will Auto was right across the street, so it'd be next to Maggie J's. They owned everything up to where Maggie J's is.
And so is that building?
That building is still there.
Okay, it is.
And behind it, there's still, I think it's storage. They've turned it into storage and so forth. And the Hawk security systems, monitoring, environmental monitoring systems, uses most of that building now. The Web station is where Maple Mart now is. There was a couple stations out on the highway, due east of town. Then there's one that's just north of where the new Casey's is. The house is still there, and I can't think of his name now. Dallas Olson, and he's a trucker, but anyway, that was a station there. Let's see. The Sinclair dealership down, that was also the auto Pontiac garage, is where now John's Glass and something else is in, just beyond, on Main Street, just beyond the elevator. And the other Sinclair station is a little building by the Catholic Church. Catty corner from the Catholic Church. It's been vacant. It's been used for a lot of different things, but it's vacant now. So that there are some of those buildings that are still there. I think Maple Mart is completely new from the old Webb station that was there. There used to be one next to the fire station too, and I don't know, that was never very well developed. Oh, that's about all of them, but they were just all over town. There was just that. The buildings, most of those buildings are not there anymore. They're just the three, I think it's the three original buildings yet that still are standing that were used by the two dealerships. Well, the Ford garage is right next to the old Casey's.
Oh.
And Langworthy has a paint shop in there, and the youth center, oh no, that was a hardware store. But between Langworthy's and going to the old Casey's, that was all the Olive garage, the Ford dealership in there.
Well, I don't want to exhaust you anymore. Is that
Well, I don't know what else to tell you.
okay?
It's time to get the corrections.